So in this video I shall show you how to make a pattern tile using Photoshop. I'm in Photoshop CC, but older versions of Photoshop will work. I'm actually in my painting workspace. I'll just minimize my panel and move my layers into a new position. That's going to help. And I'm going to make my tools a double column. So first of all, what you need to do is think about designing in a rectangle. Pulling guides out from the rulers can help with this, because you can identify where those gaps that will become really obvious as you tessellate are. So I can identify really that I've got a gap down the bottom. Some of these little gaps in the sides will need filling in with pattern elements really. And the best method for this is to work with a transparent layer. You'll notice that my pattern is on a transparent background. It makes this next step really much easier. It's not crucial, but it really makes life simple. So with my pattern layer selected and having identified these gaps in the pattern, I'm going to take my lasso tool. You can use whatever selection tools you can select your pattern areas with, but the lasso tool and polygon lasso tool are really useful for getting at sort of non-symmetrical shapes and things. I'm just zooming in. You can use your zoom tool for that, or you could use the spacebar and your option key on a Mac, or spacebar and command key on the Mac, or spacebar and control on the PC. So I'm just going to identify, I'm going to fill this gap here with this little piece of graphic, and I'm just going to marquee around, not all of it, maybe just actually this bit. And to be able to make a copy of that, I need to move back to my move tool. Keyboard shortcut for that is V actually, and instead of just doing a copy and paste, Command C, Command V, or Control C, Control V on the PC, I like to use another method, because the problem is with the Command C, Command V, or copy and paste, is you get a brand new layer that you're then going to have to merge down once you've moved your copied graphic into its new position, which is a nuisance. So I'll just throw that layer away. I prefer to, with my lasso tool, I just typed an L there, shortcut, I'm going to just pinch a bit of artwork that I want to duplicate, marquee around it. Actually I'll just take these little blobs here, and this time when I change to the move tool, V, I'm going to use an alt drag method of duplicating. I'm just scrolling around on my artboard, holding down the alt key over a selected set of pixels gives you a double-headed arrow in your cursor, a black and white arrowhead instead of the standard black arrow with scissors underneath. It's a great way to very quickly select and duplicate image elements. And I don't want to just completely duplicate that, because my brain will recognize that when I'm checking my pattern later. So I'm going to use the free transform function, and you'll find that in your edit menu under free transform, but keep an eye on your keyboard shortcuts, because they're really useful for this kind of work. So you can use Control or Command T. When you use that command, you get your transform bounding box around your selected pixels, and now I'm just going to scale it down a bit by dragging one of the corner handles, or top handle, bottom handle, side handles, to scale it so it's not quite exactly the same as the original pixels I've pinched it from. And I'm even going to sort of rotate that round just to make it very different. I'll scale it up a bit more. So I'm really aiming to fill up areas within my pattern, keeping an eye on these rectangle edges. I don't want anything to fall outside of those though. Don't forget to deselect once you've alt dragged something. So the long-winded way is using the select menu deselect command, but learn the keyboard shortcut Command D on the Mac, Control D on the PC. So you'll spend some time just looking in your pattern and finding different elements, using your lasso tool to select bits. Let's take this green leaf here. Changing to your move tool, V key, duplicating, using the Alt key to drag your copied pixels into a new position, using free transform, Command T to bring up that transform bounding box, to rotate objects, scale objects, and so forth. Once you finish your free transform, don't forget to either tick at the top, but a quicker method is to hit your enter or return key. And then once you're ready to move on to the next bit, don't forget to deselect, Command or Control D. And that's really quite laborious and too painful for me to show you how to get that as good as I want it for the next stage. So I've created another stage document here where that has been done. So it's the same pattern, I've just got a few more blobs and leaves and things around the edges. So that's step one really. Really get that pattern as rectangular as you can, but not making it too obvious where the edges are. The next stage is to crop out all this additional transparent area within your image. And again, this is where having your design on a transparent layer really helps, because when you use your crop tool to crop in, it'll snap. You'll feel it kind of snap to where the pixels are within the artboard. So crop out any unnecessarily transparent areas in the image to get it as much as tight actually as you want to that rectangular tile. So stage two is all really about getting the image perfect for tiling, for tessellating, and we need to do a little bit of maths really. It's going to make your life much easier if you go into the image menu and you check out the image size. This image is some odd sizes here, 844, 633. To make my life a bit easier, I'm going to round that down to 800. It just so happens that that's rounded to 600 nicely. But in the event that your height value doesn't round down as well, just unlink the constrain aspect ratio buttons and just round things up to their nearest equivalent. So if I set this to 800 and for whatever reason my height wasn't 600, I would unlink the constrain proportions or constrain aspect ratio, to use the right terminology, and just distort it ever so slightly to a nearest rounded number to remember. It's not too crucial, but it just makes my life easy. Jot down those numbers, you'll need them later. Click OK. Then we can start with tiling it. First thing we need to do is give ourselves much more canvas space. Let's just see what my stage 2 is. Here we go. So yeah, get your image the right size. Prepare that in stage 1. So moving swiftly on. I'm going to, at this second stage, create a bigger canvas using the image menu canvas size, and remembering that it's starting at 800 pixels and it's going to increase to 1600 wide by 1200 high. I'm going to double those width and height values, and because I want the width to go on both sides, I'm going to make sure that the anchor is set to the middle and the height is going to go top and bottom. So make sure your anchor point is set slap in the middle, so your additional canvas size is being added all around the edge. So I'm going to type in 1600 in there, and because this is canvas size, it doesn't change the height value. You're going to have to do that yourself. 1200, that's your maths done. When I click OK, you'll see we've now got a much bigger canvas, and we're going to repeat this tile across it. In this stage, you're going to make use of your layers panel. We've got our pattern layer, but we're going to duplicate that. You can duplicate layers in several ways. You can go to the layers panel menu and say duplicate layer. I'm going to rename this layer horizontal, just for the sake of this tutorial. And I'll hide my pattern layer just so that you can really see what's happening here. And this is the key and crucial bit, well, one of them. Go into your filter menu, because we're going to apply an offset filter, and it's hidden away under other. So filter menu, other, offset. And we need to really remember what those values were. So if I type in 800 in my horizontal offset value, you can see it repeats those pixels, or it actually offsets those pixels across to the right. It's horizontal pixels right. And because I've got this wraparound radio button checked, it's wrapping around all the pixels that have moved off the edge of the artboard over onto the left hand side. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to click OK. And we needed to do that on a duplicate layer because we need the original pattern layer intact. So we need to repeat that again. Another way to duplicate a layer, I'm going to just click on my pattern layer, is to right click it and access the duplicate layer command from the pop-up menu. And this one I'm going to call vertical and click OK. I'll switch off my pattern layer and my horizontal layer just so you can really see what's happening on this selected vertical layer. And again, into the filter menu, down to other, down to offset. And this time I don't want it to offset 800 along the horizontal, so I'll clear that off. But I do need it to offset the same amount along the vertical as its original height. If you remember, that was 600. And that's why I suggested you write those values down. So we've now got our vertical and horizontal edges of our pattern sorted. We've got one more to do. Another way to duplicate layers is to just grab the layer that you want to duplicate. In this case it's going to be my pattern layer, and drag it over to the page icon at the bottom of the layers panel. I'll turn off my original pattern again so you can see what's happening. This time, same thing, back into our filter menu, back into other and to offset. And this time we're going to enter a horizontal offset of 800 and a vertical offset of 600 to get our corners of our pattern tile, and click OK. So now you can see that I have all my artwork in place. Now unfortunately, if I go to my view menu and clear all the guys just to sort of show you, you can really see those stripes where those tiles meet. And so what you need to do is, using the same method as we have done, you need to copy bits from the artwork and fill in those gaps. It's going to be easier for you to just merge those layers down. You can use the layers panel menu button. I'll just move that across so they fit into the video. You can use the layers panel menu, merge visible. Don't flatten it because this transparency is really necessary for the next stage. But just if we did a merge visible here, you'll see I've just got one layer now. It's called horizontal, but you can rename it if that's irksome. I'll just drag my layers panel back over here for a sec. Then, using the same techniques as you did in the first steps, you're going to need to find bits of pattern, select them, change to your move tool, alt drag, free transform, etc, etc, and do absolutely all you can to remove the obvious joins within this pattern, keeping away from the edges. It's very important that you don't change any of the information along these edges. And because that would be quite tedious for you to watch, and I've already shown you how to use those tools and skills to copy and paste image elements, I'm going to jump over to stage 3. You can see my stage 3 document has just got some more bits in it that I've stolen. And so looking at that tile, yes, there are repeating elements because we've taken our original tile and offset it, but it's about the bits in the middle that look obvious when you're tiling it. Once that's done, you're ready to actually define your pattern tile. And that's a very simple step. First of all, make sure you're working on a single layer. Select all, Command or Control A, or use your select menu, all command. You get your running ants all around the edge of that Photoshop document. Then go to your edit menu, define pattern command. Give the pattern a sensible name. I'll call mine flowers. And they will be ready for you to use wherever you want. You can fill shapes, selections, all sorts with those patterns. And what you might want to do is just test to see how well that tessellates. So I use a technique where I create a new layer, I'll fill it with a solid colour. In this case I'm going to fill it with my background colour using a Command backspace. And then just to test that pattern, I'm going to go to my effects panel at the bottom of the layers panel, my effects button at the bottom of the layers panel, and I'm going to choose pattern overlay. And it's quite likely that when you do this for the first time, the pattern swatch that you see looks like this, but that newly created pattern that you've just defined is the latest pattern that you created. So here it is. So it should by default also say scale 100. Mine's just moved around a little bit just because I've run through this a couple of times. But when you first use that layer style command and you choose your pattern, it'll look very much like the pattern tile that you've just created. You think, well, what's the point of that? The main point I like to test it like this is because of this scale slider. And I can see what that would look like if I scale it down. And yes, you can start to see that it repeats because it is a pattern, but there are no really nasty white gaps in it. And just to prove a bit of a point, I'll just cancel that. If we go back to our original pattern stage 2, before we took the time to fill in all the gaps, and used our select all command or dragged a marquee over the whole canvas area, and then used edit, define pattern, I'll call this pattern wrong, then try to test that out. So I'm just jumping back to my layer, my solid layer there, into my effects button, pattern overlay, and I go to choose that latest pattern that I've created. You can see all those white lines in them. So that's really the difference between taking the time to fill in the gaps, gives you that, against that. So it's definitely worth doing it because you get a much less obvious pattern tile. So I hope you found that tutorial useful, and good luck creating your patterns. Feel free to comment underneath and let me know how you get on. Thanks for listening. My name's Rebecca. See you next time.